This is Christian from Choppy Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Tuesday, August 26th. Well, yesterday the breath was not particularly good. The way I classified yesterday, it was a day of digestion after Friday. It seemed like the market kind of like ran out of steam a little bit, especially in the afternoon. Today, much different. Seemed like some buyers were back in today. Stronger breath. I think the upside volume for the up volume for New York Stock Exchange was about 56, 57%. So better. And some things looked pretty good today. Nice separation in a couple different groups that we're going to go over in this video. Risk disclaimer before I do that. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving any advice or recommendations. Please read the full risk disclaimer there. So IWM up 0.8 of a percentage point. Microcaps were up 1.4%, hence the better breath today. Qs and SPY were kind of slightly positive for most of the session, but really kind of turned it on there at the end of the day. Both of those finishing up 0.4 of a percentage point. I'll give you the outlook in those. But here's really where the outperformance was today. You had uranium, nuclear names doing very well, aerospace doing very well, crypto staged to come back today. A lot of like the blockchain stocks, those finished up 2% from the open, so nice gaining over there. The banks and financials had a good day today. Industrials, clean energy, biotech snapped back from a nasty day yesterday, and the gold miners continue to chug ahead. The group that nobody seems to talk about, it was up another 2.2%. What lagged today? China sold off a little bit. That was they were also weak overnight. You could always take clues off of what the China ADRs are going to do for the session based on what the Hang Seng and what the Shanghai do overnight. Those both closed lower overnight. The consumer staples, oil services were so energy was a bit weak today. So that's what was kind of performed for the day. I want to go over to just talking about what the best group of the day was, or what I thought the best group of the day was. Stop the screen share, and I'm just going to go to our midday note, which, by the way, you can get the midday note. Try back at tddtrading.substack.com. But here's one of the things that I talked about in the midday note was that a lot of positive news. I like when you happen to get like two or three things that are positive. Like sometimes it's just one story can do it, but there's three things that I saw were positive today. There was a broker dealer upgrade. Bank of America upgraded Oklo. I like this story the best out of the three. LEU, Centrus Energy signs agreement, uh, and that's with Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power, and then there was also a story on UUUU. So when you add these things together, number one, it's a positive day for this group, but it just shows also that there is a need for nuclear and uranium, and in that space it's very strong, and that's something that we've seen now for a number of months. So dips continue to get bought. That seems to be the pattern, is when things kind of cool off a little bit, not just the uranium and nuclear space, but when things kind of cool off, right? You don't want to necessarily neglect these names or positions and say, oh, that was it, they had a good run. You want to monitor for these things coming back up, because these were very strong. And like, this is a company too, BWXT, which I'll go over in just a second. This had great earnings. It had a huge earnings gap. Right? And it takes time, I think, for something like that, where it kind of, what do they say, outruns the defense a bit, right? These things kind of come in a little bit when they go a little bit too far on earnings. I'm going to start with the first chart that I'm going to start with is RSP. I'm just going to start there because sometimes you hear some of these things on financial media. In this case, it was CNBC. There was an analyst talking about, well, this year it's only been a few names that have been responsible for all the gains. Now you have to be careful about how you word these things. Um, Basically, yes, in a market cap weighted index, that's how it's always going to be. So when you hear somebody come out with one of these narratives that say, well, in the S&P, the gains have been been mostly responsible for just a few companies. That's how a market cap weighted index works. The larger names, right? So if you've got something that has a 15% weight in an index and it goes up 2%, right? That is going to be responsible more for the gains than something that's a 1% weight in the index that goes up 3%. Right? So the smaller names in an index, in a market cap weighted index, could go up more, but they're not going to have the same effect because of just straight up math, right? So you have to multiply the weight times the gain, right? And if something is 10, 15, 12% and it goes up 1%, I'll say it again in a different way. It That will have more of an index effect than something that goes up 3% that is only 1% weight, right? That's just math. But that doesn't mean that there's not many names going up right now. Look at and I have them up in front of you. This is how another way, an important way to look at it. Look at what the RSP is doing. This is the every name in this index is equally weighted. And it's the same 500 names that are in SPY, or roughly 500 names. Uh, and they're equally weighted. This is up 8.5%. So there's no way that you could have that you could say that there's only been a couple names that are making gains in the market. It's been a very strong market over the last 3 or 4 months, and I don't think there's a lot of argument there. Again, since April, right? There's been shallow dips all along, and now we're going to go to the SPY because I want to go over a couple things to kind of look at. But that's what we've got over the last, especially the last couple months. It's just been shallow dips, right? You may want something else. You may want more market volatility, but there's a plenty of volatility in single name stocks that are going and seeing rotations under the hood, right? It's important to not just look at the indices. It's important to look at what's going on, you know, uh, under the hood, to find out if it is just a few names or if it's a lot of rotations that are happening, and that it does happen in a bull market. So that's where we're at right now. Now things could change. We do have a big company reporting after the close tomorrow, right? Said Nvidia, and that's going to affect a lot of different names. AI is a big theme this year, right? So it's going to have an effect on names that go into that power the AI move. Networking companies, data centers, right? So it's going to be a big report tomorrow. Even though Nvidia is only implying about a 6% move, I think other it's going to be responsible for a lot of other moves. So SPY, I just wanted to go over the 1 hour chart. I had mentioned a level. If you're a regular viewer of my midday note of the Substack, you know that I've talked about this level 642.91. We breached that yesterday, right? We were a little bit. I mentioned we were a little bit weak, right? We breached that yesterday, and then we kind of came back here in the aftermarket. We moved down on some headlines. I don't want to get into the political headlines, but then we kind of came back and we're back above here. Now we're challenging those. We have not taken out the highs. It's almost like we're waiting for something. Last week, and I'm not a big fan of this, but it is what it is. Last week, there was one big event day waiting for Powell, and huge moves happened. This week, so that was last week with micro. This week, it's probably going to be more earnings generated with Nvidia reporting tomorrow after the close, as well as a few other names. Again, AI is a big driver. It's not the only theme out there, but it is a big theme right now. So we have not taken out those highs from last week. Notice that we stopped right around the top of the value area. Qs are going to look a little bit different here. We've talked about how there's been some relative weakness. It seems like the Qs are waiting, right? They are waiting for a potential all clear from Nvidia that AI demand is still strong, or something other. Notice that we're kind of back to where we were on Friday here, but not taking out, not really changing the trend here. Notice that black line in there, that's the 200 period moving average. Also, I'm going to bring one other thing to your attention. Now, please don't get mad at me for saying this, but it does look like right now that this could be the making of a head and shoulders pattern. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, because it's not a head and shoulders pattern until you break the neckline. But here's a potential left shoulder, head, and here's a potential right shoulder. And here would be the neckline. Now, a lot of times with these possible head and shoulders patterns, what happens is you do this: you go down, then up, then down, check back in here, and then you blast off to the upside. So I can't really tell you what's going to happen here. I would wait for the pattern to kind of emerge itself, and that might take a little bit of time with the Qs, which have been lagging a little bit in the short term. Right, here's IWM. So again, all I'm saying is that we don't know how this is going to work. For now, what I tend to use as well is just basics. And this is right now we're trading above the value area for the month. And we're trading slightly above these short-term moving averages. So that looks fine to me. I'm kind of just reading into this a little bit, which I probably shouldn't do. For now, it is what it is. We're above we're trending. We're trending in the right direction. We've got to get through a little bit of resistance, as I mentioned in the 1 hour chart, and get through last week's highs. Other than that, I have nothing really to complain about. IWM, and I do a lot of complaining. IWM, I mentioned that we could probably hover around this VPOC for a little bit. That's what we're doing right now. And again, you might see some twists and turns along the way, but the twists and the turns and the dips have been places to add risk. And because that we are seeing these shallow dips. So notice we kind of just returned right back to where we were late in the day on uh, Friday of last week. All right, so that's what's going on there. I'm going to go through some of those charts that I mentioned in terms of the uranium names. I like this LEU. Nice move here. Gets back above all those short-term moving averages. Where would I be looking at a long? Or if I was long, because I'm not long this one, but I would say watch this 201.90 level. Notice just getting back above the 20-day moving average and 50-day moving average here, also above the 5-day moving average. So this is back above all these short-term moving averages, right? And it just had a funky earnings response. Sometimes when these names have gone up a lot, they have this type of response. I mentioned BWXT. This is a case of where I showed that smaller chart. Again, just huge move and then retraced about 50% of that. So I would like to see it get back above the 5 period moving average. I also tend to look at these plays on a 1 hour chart. So for now, I decided to go long this name because I thought that the earnings were excellent. Right. And again, that's a lot of what I do is I look for names that have had strong earnings and that are dipping a little bit on that earnings report. Couple other names that I thought were interesting. Tesla, right? This is a name that I got long. What was it, yesterday, I believe? Or I had been long and I took it off, and I got long again in Tesla, and I've been long this in the TDD trend portfolio. But nice follow through, up 1.5%. I did take another target in this today, but ultimately this looks like a great pattern, and just slightly above where we were in here. So here's your breakout, retest, and moving back up again. Looks really good to me, and I'm long. What else did I wanted to cover here? Let's do app lovin'. This is if you're a viewer, if you're a reader of the Substack, you know this was one of my favorite positions coming into this week. Held the 20-day moving average really well, and extending higher after that nice hammer bar and follow through after that. I know a lot of people are looking at Palantir. I am also long this name here too. Watch this 160 level. Notice that last week just wasn't ready, but just hanging on to this 50-day moving average quite nicely. So let's see if this wants to continue to move higher here. Again, taking its time, going sideways a little bit. And I would like to see a move, a continuation above its value area. Uh, let's do Let's talk about another strong group right now. The satellite wireless group, huge, absolutely humongous move, up 70% by EchoStar. But you go through some of these other names that are in this group, um, and just bring up my spreadsheet because I'm forgetting which symbol that I wanted to bring up next. Um, VSAT is the is the one. Now I don't trade this one that much. Or in fact, I'm sorry, I don't think I've ever traded VSAT before. But again, all I'm showing you is how strong this group is. Another name that reported earnings last week that I did get long and put it to the TDD trend portfolio is UI. Notice the earnings gap. Notice the volume on this, right? When you see volume like that, it just means people are kind of caught off guard and they are not long the name and are most likely going to have to start to accumulate the name up here. It becomes a big eye opener. And you could see this running now on a couple days for a couple days after earnings. The power generation companies, I mentioned these earlier. GEV is my favorite in the space. Notice how it climbed above the value area today. I went long this last week on the dip. It worked out for me, but I knew that we had some resistance to get through, so I decided to get rid of the trade for profits. But notice it come back here, right? And VST saw a huge call buyer for December. I did get long this one, even though I don't like this as much as I like GEV, but it just seemed like there was some big accumulation going on here. So I'm long this name. TLN also moved up a lot today, but this was an index rebalance. They're being added to the S&P 400, so the mid cap ETF. Just a couple other names that I'm watching too. And again, sometimes you do have to flip out of names. MPI made a lot of money. I didn't like that reversal bar today, even though it's still holding the 5 period moving average. But I decided to take gains in this for now, and rotate it out a little bit. So just have to be mindful of some of these names that will go up for a couple days and then kind of stall out a little bit. You don't want to give back some of those gains that you earned. Rocket Labs was another one that I got long yesterday. This set up pretty nice, and again, this one did not give back any gains. Why? Because I knew exactly where I wanted to take the trade off, right at the top of the value area. So now I will watch it and see if it kind of backs and fills, holds back above the 5 period moving average, and maybe it will hold in there. Another name that we saw some call buying in yesterday was Rigetti Computing, quantum name, like the spot here. When notice that the last few times that this has gone up, like if you've chased or traded or bought on strength, you're probably a bit disappointed. But if you've been buying these dips in RGTI, it's got a nice channel here. And the 50-day moving average has been acting as support all along the way. So very good, moves, a lot to trade. So even though this week has been choppy to start, there's been a lot of trading opportunities. Hence the watch list that I construct every weekend for members, and I go through this for members. This is I'll show you kind of what our trades channel looks like throughout the day, but you can kind of see. Right. So I go through chart by, I go name by name by name by name, and I give commentary and for each one of those names that are on the watch list, why I like it, what the setup is, and so on and so forth. So check out our trading room, tribecatradegroup.com. You could get kind of prepared with some of these themes and areas that are performing well and outperforming the market. Guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.